you can accept what you just said and go, yeah, she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. And then, they bring water to life and all this kind of stuff. The rituals take place and she's brought back to life. What happened was I did my initial video and all of the Christians were like losing it. And this happens every time with West Huff right now. I'm noticing something of an absolute diehard tribalistic mentality from them to the point of toxicity, blame game of me. Dr. Joshua Bowen, you read and can write or decipher, if you will, and oftentimes speak, if you will, Sumerian, Akkadian, I'm sure that Aramaic and Hebrew to some degree, like clearly you have these under your belt, these languages. And I say to some degree because like you might be more fluent in something here or whatever, but you understand these languages. Therefore, you're an expert when it comes to Assyriology. Mainly, you're an expert in these languages and these texts that we have discovered, their stories and things like that you like to explore. Now, I'm not saying you're an expert on every dynamic of that, of course, because there's specialists in each. But Inanna's descent, it's not only you, but Megan, who's an absolute gangster when it comes to Inanna.
Yeah.
And I did a video critiquing, I started actually a series that I wanted to continue, and immediately, it only took one video to get derailed from continuing on the series that I was motivated to go down, because Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy did a response, and it really did try to make me look up. And I'm trying to play cool sport. I'm in the chat, like his audience is extremely toxic toward me, which I imagine my audience would be the same with him. So, I don't know. How do you cipher through that?
Because it's a journey.
All a journey. I do this 2-hour video about him making a claim about Dionysus. And then he's like, oh, what? You don't want your audience to watch my whole video? Because there's a lot of context that they need to see. Like as if, this will educate them and show them why people in your crowd, Derek, that think you're on the right track with compared to mythology and things like that. And it debunks this notion. And I think he meant zeitgeist when he started his critique. But it turned out to be much more broadly tackling ideas that actually do, I think, have validity. One of the things he discussed, and thanks to Neil from Gnostic Informant from looking at his video, was Inanna's descent. Of course, Baal gets mentioned, and he wants to go with Mark Smith's, I'm not sure the middle initial, interpretation that he's just a disappearing god in this particular text. Paula Corrente, who's a classicist, but also understands these languages and has read this and said, sorry, he's a dying and rising god in this myth. I understand there are other ones. This text seems to indicate he died and rose again. She said the same for Inanna. She thinks died and resurrected, a dying god who rises again. I'm giving all of this to kind of paint a picture. So I contacted you because as I try to do with MythVision, and I'm not always perfect at this, I will reach out to an academic and go, hey, can you give me your, I know you know this stuff. Can you read this and we'll watch this? What is going on here? Is Michael Jones correct? You immediately responded, I already talked to him about this.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of that context.
Yeah. At this point, you would think that I would have memorized these dates because of the controversy that ensued. I don't remember. It was apparently earlier this year. I'm sorry, I guess it's last year now, 2024.
Yeah.
He messaged me. And Mike and I have been friendly, up until, I guess, recent history. And he messaged me and he said, hey, there was like a Twitter, something on Twitter. I was responding to Frank Turk.
Right.
And Frank Turk made the statement, I can't remember exactly, but they're like, there are no examples of dying and rising gods in ancient world or whatever. I don't remember exactly.
Right.
And I just said, how do you account for Inanna's descent? And I quoted the lines. It's like lines 170 to 173. I think I did in the tweet, probably not in the tweet, or I said the lines in the tweet. There you go. And so Michael messaged me, and I feel comfortable saying this now because
he showed I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I'm usually very reticent to give any kind of detail about private conversations that I have, but since he's already, and it's fine.
Not like anything.
Right. Yeah. just as an aside, I always assume that whatever message that I send to somebody on like a private message like that is going to eventually be shown in public. I just assume that
At this point,
yeah, just to be safe. So he said it was very kind, right? No question, very kind. And look, I heard you or I saw you say this on Twitter, and I was just curious. Uh, and he cited an article by Aaron Landis in the '60s that had a different interpretation. And that the problem, as you know, but just so the audience,
yeah, please.
the issue in the text is that Inanna's descent is a story about Inanna abandoning, in the beginning of the text, abandoning all of the shrines and all of the things that she has care over. She abandons them all to go down to the netherworld. And on the way down, her minister in Shubor, which, just as an aside, I'll probably pronounce it incorrectly, but I think Michael was referring to her as Ninkabor.
I don't know.
And the reason, just so that everybody understands, the reason I suspect is that there's a website called ETCSL, Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature. And they have Sumerian texts in translation. And one of Sumerian and Akkadian both have a letter that's an SH letter.
Right. That spells like k, k. It's spelled like we would say k.
Well, it's even more simplistic than that, I guess. So the way that people in Assyriology write this, and in other languages that have this, is they'll write an S, but with a little V, a little caret on top. And that's to let you know phonetically you're supposed to pronounce this SH. So the problem is that in online databases inside, you don't always have the option of writing an S with a V, right? So in order to make it searchable, I suspect this is what it is, in order to make it searchable for the general public, the SH phoneme, they represented with a C. So if you wanted to search on shoe 2, S, which is S with a little V on top, U, then you would type in C, U, and then the number 2. Well, when you write the name Ninshubor, it has this SH sound in it. So Nin, this SH, U, Bor, Ninshubor. But when they wrote it in ETCSL or online databases, they spelled it NINCUBUR. And the C is to represent that SH sound that you don't have, most people don't have access to. So he read it, and again, no shame. Like, I'm not throwing any shame. I would have read it in Kubor as well if I didn't know. But I remember the first time hearing, who the hell is Ninkubor or Ninkubura? Anyway, but it's Ninshubor. It's because that C is, anyway.
We just got a lesson on how to linguistically pronounce the name from the experts who are reading this and understanding that. And that was just an important little lesson to understand. If you're going to go to this text, now you know. And by the way, this is a shameless plug. You teach Sumerian, you teach Hebrew. Like, you can take classes by Dr. Josh. If you're interested in really knowing the language, which means you can go back into these ancient texts and start reading them yourselves, sign up for those courses.
Yeah, we're actually starting one. What's today? January something. I don't know what today is. So we're starting one on the 13th of this month. Oh, yeah. That's an 11-week course to take a Sumerian one. So, yeah, people are interested.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got time. You're interested in signing up for it. I will get you a link so you can
cool.
put it in the description.
So sign up there. But okay, so he is describing Inanna's descent. Now, are we at the conference where Michael Jones is giving the presentation here?
Well, so where it started with me was that he wrote and he said, look, there's this part that you talk about, and let me pick up the myth there. So Ninshubor is Inanna's minister, and she's following her to the netherworld. And she turns to her and says, listen, I'm going to give you some instructions here. I'm going to the netherworld. I want you, after I've been down there, make the rounds to the different temples of some of the major deities. And go to Enlil and go to Inanna, whatever. And then ultimately, she says, you'll end up at Enki. And say things like, don't let Inanna's metal become like alloyed down and with the dirt in the netherworld. In other words, don't leave her down there to die. Do something to rescue her. And so she says, got it. And Inanna descends to the netherworld. And there's this whole interaction that she's at the gate of the netherworld with the guard of the netherworld. She has to take off all these, the maze, these powers. They sort of trick her into taking them off, so she's much more vulnerable when she gets in there. And she gets down there and she sits on the throne of Ereshkigal, and Ereshkigal and the Inanna gods are super pissed, and so they kill her essentially, pretty much. So Inanna dies, she becomes a corpse, and the text says that she's hung up on a peg. Then it says, and after 3 days and 3 nights, Ninshubor goes off to start Perhession.
Right.
So the way that everybody reads this, the way that people understand this,
All experts.
I mean, not all of them, but I haven't checked everybody. But
Yeah.
Certainly even the most recent translations and commentaries on this would say I'm thinking of Weitzel, for example, has in this volume that Conrad Folk edited, where he's got stories in Sumerian. Weitzel has this translation and then says in a little comment or in his summary, after, so Inanna dies and she's hung on a peg, and then after 3 days and 3 nights, Ninshubor begins her rescue mission, I think is what he says in German. And so this is just sort of the way the text reads, right? It's sort of the at face value, if you read the text, that's what it looks like. And this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then 3 days after this last thing happens, which is when she's home, when she's on a whole peg, Ninshubor starts oration. Okay. So he messages me and says, Landis has this other interpretation in this article where he thinks that what it is it's not her being hung on the peg dead for 3 days and 3 nights, but it's how long it took her to go down into the underworld. That's right. The journey itself took 3 days and 3 nights. So I said, jokingly, curse you, Michael, for making me do this research. I've got stuff I'm doing. So, but anyway, I dove into the Sumerian.
And just so that anybody knows, when I throw you anything that is in your wheelhouse, dude, I am literally screwing up his schedule. It's he's going to figure it out. Man, I got to figure it out.
So, and it was fun. It was a really good thing. And of course, I was just teasing him. I enjoyed that sort of thing. But I dug into the Sumerian, looked into the grammar and the syntax, looked at the lines. And I said, all right, look, here are, several examples of similar syntactical constructions, often using this exact same verbiage with this same verb and this same temporal construction with ta at the end of one. And I said, in each of the cases, it really does seem like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then 3 days or, a set period of time after this last thing happens, the next thing happens. It just seems like the way that I would read it. And so I messaged him back and said, this is what I've come to. I'd probably have to look at a whole bunch of examples of this grammatical construction with this temporal construction with ta in Sumerian, just more generally to confirm this. But this is how it reads to me. And it, at the end, I thought, this is kind of case closed on this.
Well, yeah. So just so people understand, you're thinking, here I am, I know the language. Michael's asking sincerely so that he is not making a mistake. And you're thinking, okay, maybe at this point he may be satisfied or desire to go deeper, but he's persuaded maybe I should not go with the 1967 Landis interpretation and go with the more actual Assyriologist, because we did a little research on Landis. Probably a brilliant Bible scholar to some degree. I would imagine. Yeah, he has a lot of credentials.
Trained by Albright.
Yeah, this guy's legit bona fide Hebrew Bible scholar, but Hebrew is not Sumerian. And
it was the 50s.
Right. And so you're dealing with a period where we've got more material now. We've learned a lot more, and scholars are, beyond that. So not saying completely, you can still go back to this period and, of course, learn so much. The point I'm getting at is once you address that, you came to me when I asked you to watch this point on the video that he did in his conference, where he is this authority presenting an idea that's tackling all practical comparative mythology because Jesus is involved.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd ever do a presentation or it gave any interest. This is something about apologetics, I feel. If Jesus wasn't involved and we were just doing comparatives between Hinduism and various ancient Near Eastern mythologies and stuff, he wouldn't even care. It's because Jesus is in the mix. And for me, at this point in my journey and engaging with apologetics and being one myself at one point who was defending his versions of theology and stuff, the fact that Inanna gets brought up raises red flags for me to going, why is he picking Inanna? And I know that mythicist Richard Carrier has brought up that he defines crucifixion in a much more general sense. He doesn't take it as like Jew on a stick by Romans, okay, as exclusive, we're gonna kill him on a tree, that kind of thing. That he kind of looks at it as like these deaths, like looking at Prometheus being nailed to a rock or tied to a rock where he's being killed each day and an eagle comes down and eats his liver and it regenerates. Or Inanna, he thinks that's a crucifixion of some sort where Inanna is killed and hung up on something dead. I don't want to strawman him in his book, but he does that, right? So I think that's what Michael's reacting to because he is, in my opinion, trying to disassociate these myths from being even similar in any remote way so that it protects the validity and uniqueness of his particular worldview. And I don't get it in this case because Inanna's so way back here. I'm looking at New Testament. Maybe you can make some general parallels, but I don't know any way linguistically or any way for me to say the gospel authors borrowed from Inanna. So you can accept what you just said and go, yeah, she was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. And then, they bring water life and all this kind of stuff, or the rituals take place and she's brought back to life. I think it scares people to realize that other gods died and rose again. And I think this is the motivated reason behind trying to say it was 3 days that she went down, but she still comes back to life in the myth. The point is that 3-day kind of motif. We see that with Jonah. We see that with Jesus, which makes me want to dig and go, where did Jonah get this idea? Because I think that's what Landnez was trying to hint at.
Yeah.
Sorry for the ramble to make this point, but you thought, holy crap, I already told him this.
Well, see, that's the thing. You sent me a link to a video. And by the way, this happens all the time. Yeah, with me and you and Kipp and Skylar Friction. And like we send video clips to each other all the time. Like, have you seen this? What do you think about this? So I open up this link and it's just all like I just see Michael giving a presentation. So yeah, I've got a lot going on. The last thing on earth I do with any video that you send or anybody sends is like investigate it.
No.
Right?
Yeah. See, by the way, it took you days before you got back to
it. And my assumption with this was like, okay, Michael just posted this video of him speaking at a conference. And so that's what that seemed to me was this just happened. Here's a new video that just came out. Is this right?
Right. And can I give context so that as you're laying that out, I was accused of being a liar, right? The heat in the kitchen started to turn up. We were cooking each other, okay? What happened was I did my initial video and all the Christians were like losing it. And this happens every time with West Huff right now. I'm noticing something of an absolute diehard tribalistic mentality from them to the point of toxicity, blame game of me. It's happening a lot to the point where I'm like getting a little bit more salty about how much more this kind of thing needs to be defeated. This mentality and this entire fundamentalism pertaining to apologetics needs to be defeated in my mind. If you're a Christian watching this, what I'm trying to say is if you don't want me to be more combative in terms of being, you might want to be more like Christ and not be such a dick in the chat. Honestly, because you're actually making me want to even be more cutthroat and be more precise and be more antagonistic in the sense of showing more evidence that humanizes your religion to the point where more people are going to be leaving it. It's just inevitable. And I'm being honest with you. Like, I'm telling you how I feel and expressing. I'm a human. I'm not perfect. But I say that to say, I did the video responding to his shut up.
Yes.
Arrogant shut up phrase that he said. Very arrogant that he made this comment. Now, he said, I thought it was a joke, whatever. He had all his excuses. He did a hit piece with him and Manning making me look stupid. I'm trying to play cool, but they also did try to make me look dumb. We did investigating. You came back and said, hold on, I already told him this. You didn't realize this was 8 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really like, here we are 8 months later, critiquing this video he already did 8 months ago. You thought it was recent, and it was like 4 months ago or something from that time or whatever. Meaning 8 months ago, Michael approaches you, or I'm sorry, he does this presentation. After the presentation, he approaches you about it turns out you were thinking he did this presentation recently, and it was a while ago that he had asked you about this, and he still went with this interpretation.
That's how it came across to me, right?
Right.
And so I thought, well, gosh, like, I mean, I guess it's not surprising it wasn't surprising to me in my mind to think, all right, I laid this out, you just didn't accept it. I mean, that happens all the time.
Right.
So that's when I wrote back and said, like, I don't know why he's bringing this up again. Like, I've already talked to him about this. So then, you know, all right, here's the data that I laid out in this interaction that I had. And so I wrote you this letter. And I think you actually read it, or
sure. I read some of it. It was pushing to me, and they were rushing so much that I couldn't get it all.
So, you know, and what I did, because this had come up again, I did a little more digging, and so I found a couple of extra examples. But one of the things that I realized I had told him in this interaction was that there is a set of variants in that line, whatever, 170, I think.
Yeah,
whatever it was.
This was a powerful point.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that, you know, when you think about grammar and syntax, there's fluidity. Like, a writer can do all kinds of things playing with syntax, but there's and this is one of the really cool things about learning Sumerian. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. That's true. But you know, I mean, it's really cool to learn Sumerian. But when you do, you can go to these online resources and you can get this kind of information that I'm getting ready to lay out, because you can look at the Sumerian and see it. But one of the things that you have in those lines is you have, this isn't like the Hebrew Bible, where we have much later manuscripts, or the New Testament, you know, much later manuscripts. These come from the Old Babylonian period. So when these texts were being copied as scribal exercises, we have the actual scribal exercises.
Right.
And so students are copying out these texts as scribal exercises, right? These literary texts. And so we have different tablets that have, just like with the Hebrew Bible, different variations. This line has a particular verb and this grammatical feature, but this other manuscript has a slightly different grammatical feature, or whatever.
Right.
So some of the variants that we have for that particular line, instead of saying after 3 days and 3 nights, we have a manuscript or two that say after
7 months.
After 7 months.
Another one, 7 years, 7 months, 7 days.
That's right. 7 years, 7 months, 7 days. And then after certain amount of, like, it's broken years. Anyway, it's a much longer period of time, to the point even years.
Yeah. Which makes me personally, knowing how agricultural these societies were, makes me wonder if there was a famine at some point and people gave a general, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
But I think the point here for this discussion is, if you're going to make the argument that this X number of days, X number of nights, X period of time, whatever, refers to the travel,
Yeah.
Now you're having to say that there's some reasonable expectation that it took 7 years and 7 months and 7 days to reach to another world.
Yeah.
And that's not, that's going to be I think that's going to be a hard.
Our variants to you help in assessing how the ancient reader and writer would have interpreted or understood this kind of text. So that kind of brings me back to, you super chatted me when me and Nil did a live stream after that, indicating like, hey, so there's so many layers here. Mike Jones did a video, I'm a liar or they are lying, right? Now,
right.
This is to save face, I think, from his audience, but he had 2 points.
Yeah. and this is, and maybe it'd be good for me to from my perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm watching this because you told me like, hey, there's a response coming or something.
Yeah.
And so I'm watching part of it while I'm like baking something, and he says, essentially, I had this conversation with Dr. Josh after I did this presentation in the video that they're talking about. So I looked back at my messages and looked at the date, and then I pulled this video up and I look at the date and I was like, oh, well, that one's on me. Because the way that there's no way you could have anticipated or understood, or
I didn't see your texts. I didn't know when these things happen.
well, the way that I responded to it was, I have already talked to him about this, which there's no other way that I can think of to interpret that than I talked to him,
Of course.
and now he's giving this presentation after I've talked to him about this. So that's on me, right? So I remember I called you and like, I apologize, man. This is sorry.
It happens. This is an accident that happened.
Yeah.
But he made a mountain out of a molehill on that because he felt threatened, or reputation, or me and Neil had the assumption his motives were thinking he's fishing for an answer that he wants and didn't come to that conclusion. That's what we felt was happening. You could see why we had that interpretation.
Sure. But my issue here, though, the thing that I started to think as I watched part of this response was, wait, does that mean that Michael agrees with me?
That's what I still don't get. So this is the thing. It'd be very humbling, and I would feel even much more like, okay, cool, we're getting somewhere. Michael's open-minded to change. If he really listened to a bona fide expert like you, who's also listening to other bona fide experts and is aware of what the bona fide experts in the field are saying on this particular thing, and he said, all right, you know what? I did change my mind. That would make me more wrong. If I'm going to paint a picture here, it would make me more wrong and going, you know what? We did jump the gun. Michael changed his mind when he talked to an expert. The sad and unfortunate thing is ever since the hit piece on me being a liar, me and Neil, being a liar that he did, and it, like, just to try to make us look terrible, I'm in the live chat trying to communicate, bring me on, dude, let's calm this thing down, like we'll be cool. Because I'm punching back, and he's punching me, and I'm punching him. Well, I walked away from the live stream going, okay, you only had two things you got me on. Two things. The chronology pertaining to this Inanna thing of when Josh and me and confusion, easily seen as a mistake. The other thing was a fault of my own. I didn't watch the whole live stream him and Manning did. So let me regather my thoughts here for a second. And that is, I'm in the chat. I'm trying to, calm down and understand what he's saying, because he's saying that, oh, I got them now, because he's like hyping his audience up. I got them now. The Inanna thing mistake, we're going to get to that in just a moment. Your point, emphasizing that for the viewer who doesn't get what just happened. But then also, I didn't watch the whole live stream with him and Manning like from beginning to end. And in there, he does correct himself. So I want everyone, the viewer who even saw this unfold, to think about what just happened. 8 months earlier, whatever the amount of time exactly it was, because that's from when I did the video, which might be 9 months, not 10 months, I don't know. He makes the statement, it comes from a 3rd century text, shut up. Okay. About Achilles Tatius, which he didn't even mention the source in the initial thing, that Dionysus turns water into wine. I made my video in the dark, not knowing the source, but started checking Dionysus. He could do it yourself and find out how many miracle wine stuff that happens beforehand, and how some of these myths get so close to literally practically saying the water is being transformed. The actual water is changing into wine. And in cases like Pliny's, it's changing back into water even. It's very obvious what's happening, but like they need it to say that it changed. And it's so their expectation is over the top of what they need. Long story short, in that live stream, what I missed when I capitalized on him not getting the correct dating of the source, I emphasize he just doesn't even know the dating of the source. He later corrects himself, must have looked it up while they're on the live and went, I'm sorry, actually the text is 2nd century, now 3rd century. So you've let the audience originally is left in the dark, thinking that Dionysus only turns water and wine. An additional 100 years later, after Jesus, indicating, don't even think Dionysus has any influence on Jesus, which is absurd to me at this point in my research. And several academics that I've talked to. Maybe I'll bring up a few examples with you to get your personal opinion about what it sounds like. Now, he gets me on this and says, I did correct myself. You're correct, Mike. I should have thoroughly listened to everything you said. You corrected yourself 8 to 10 months later.
Yeah, I mean, I have thoughts on that,
But he also made the error when I asked him in the super chat when he said 3rd century again. Then sometime after I saw that answer, he then corrected himself, maybe a minute or two. I don't know, but I didn't watch all that. I just saw him answer again, 3rd century, and thought, man.
So if I put myself in that position, if I'm speaking and I say, the earliest manuscripts that we have of the Sumerian king list come from the Old Babylonian period. And then I let 20 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, and I say, sorry, I said Old Babylonian period. I meant the Ur 3 period. And somebody puts out a response video saying, here's Joshua Bowen saying the earliest manuscript that we have of the Sumerian king list comes from the Old Babylonian period. I mean, is he even an Assyriologist? I don't get mad at them. Like, I say, you are absolutely right. That was on me. I corrected it later.
Yeah.
But here, like, you're right. That was me misspeaking, right? Or me not thinking it through or whatever.
But this is the thing. I don't expect everyone to be like that. Like, you're very, very kind, okay? But this is 8 to 10 months, Josh.
Right.
This is my real point. That you were wrong originally, dude. Like, what I'm saying is like, yes, I am, bro. I literally said, Josh, I was wrong about 2 of those things. I am not afraid to make mistakes or be wrong. You know this shit.
Of course.
Dude, my channel, I'll make hypotheses. I'll go out and test shit, turn around and change my mind on what I thought because I think I was wrong. That's okay with my position. I don't have an ontological worry about what I'm right or wrong about. I can say something bad about Jesus, and I'm not worried about hell. I can say something good about Jesus. I don't expect reward, okay? What I'm saying is he could be right, and I was wrong about 2 of those things. We were wrong, easily seeing why we were confused about the whole Inanna thing. Your point stands. Did Michael Jones change his mind? Because if he didn't, this isn't the gotcha Michael thinks it is. If Michael is making me out to be a liar because we got the chronology wrong, and it turns out he's giving you the finger on the information you gave as an expert, nah, I'm going with 1967 Landis who doesn't even know Sumerian. I'm going to go with him over you in terms of the experts that are contemporaneous on interpreting this. Hate to break it to you, Michael. I admitted I was wrong on the chronology, but I'm not actually as wrong as you think. This looks worse for you because now it's like we were right. It wouldn't matter if you shop for him before or after because you still didn't accept the actual academics in this claim. That's the one example I wanted to make and emphasize that. And we still don't know if he changed his mind.
Yeah, I guess for me, we did a video response to that or a video about the Wes Huff, Billy Carson discussion. And one of the things that I pointed out is that Wes cited Leviticus 25 as the passage, the chapter that has the anti-kidnapping law, and which is wrong. And I said, now, I'm going to, assume the best and that he meant Exodus 21 and just said Leviticus 25 because both deal with slavery.
Yeah.
Okay. It would be very easy for me to say, oh my gosh, like, look at this guy. He can't even keep the law collection straight. Like here, this is one of the big verses that apologists bring out every time, and he can't even keep it straight. Like, boom, mic drop. Yeah, I don't even, like, do I even need to engage with what this guy says? But that that would be very disingenuous of me, I think, and not intellectually honest, because it's not steel manning somebody's position.
Right.
And I feel like I see this a lot in Christian apologetics. And Kipp and I have talked about this in recent work with like rationality rules. That there seems to be this rhetorical strategy of honing in on something, some misstep, something that they got wrong, whatever it is, and making that the focal point of the discussion. And you can spend lots of time on that, and really, and particularly if it's something that is, if somebody were to say the Sumerian text, the Enuma Elish.
Yeah.
Well, it's not Sumerian, right? It's Akkadian. And even if that wasn't like a misstatement, even if, that's something that somebody doesn't know.
Right.
If somebody were to say, yes, the Sumerian text, the Enuma Elish, talks about the ascendancy of Marduk. If I were to say, oh my gosh, they don't even know that it's Akkadian, not Sumerian, I don't even have to deal with this person, what they're arguing. That's fallacious, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because, okay, yeah, so they don't know that it's in Akkadian, not Sumerian. Fine. Like, that does say things. It tips me off where they're coming from, maybe their knowledge of, the text on that level. But what is it that they're arguing?
Right.
And if I'm trying to actually engage with what the person is saying, focusing in on this little thing.
And it's distracting.
That's right.
So you're let's get back to Wes, as you brought this point about man stilling. The way I would paint what I feel Michael Jones did in a way is no myth or no story. There's no miracle of water to wine by Dionysus before the 3rd century AD. Wrong text, man stilling. It means no slavery, you're stilling men. Notice how it's not just the wrong text, but the utilization of what he used it for had zero impact and nothing to do with slavery in the sense that what we were discussing. It had nothing to do with what Billy and him were doing, because the context is you can't steal people that, free people or even other people's slaves. You'll be put to death if you're doing that kind of illegal activity. You could own people. You can have chattel slaves. You can have sex slaves. You can have this and that. You can't steal.
You can't procure them illegally.
But notice in the context, you're actually giving the accurate understanding of that material and pointing out, if you added to that, dude, by the way, you also were wrong about the very text that you say it was at. Now, when you get pedantic like that, when it's happening to you all the time, because this is what apologists do, this is what I capitalized on and realized once I knew what source it was when him and Manning did the stream, I was like, oh, hold on. Dictations? Let me do my research. Oh, wow. Pulled up the Tim Whitmarsh commentary, read the commentary, read what he had to say about some scholars who argue and articulate that it looks like it could be a polemic against the Eucharist in Christianity. Some say, no, it's a similar phraseology that comes from a commentary and myth. Like, I went in deep, dude. I went into all of this. But the dating of it is 2nd century, not 3rd. Well, what Michael did was, though I corrected myself and said it was 2nd century, but then he kind of doubles down, right? And he goes, but there is a 3rd century manuscript that indicates that myth exists. So no matter what, he's right. He's right if he's wrong, and he's never wrong. This is how it feels to me. And it's like, okay, but I'm happy to go, I was wrong about the chronology. You accept some of this responsibility, and I don't think you deserve to accept that because I should have done that thorough research and caught it. But either way, Josh, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We were wronged, Michael. Ow.
Yeah.
We're okay with making the mistake, and we apologize for making these errors, especially if you feel that this is somehow what we think we're taking you down by. No, I still stand behind that his utilization of that myth which in the myth is an origin myth of why wine exists and what were the magical properties of wine. All it is, in a nutshell, the myth goes like this. There's a shepherd in Tyre that Dionysus approaches, and it says, at that time in history, it's pretty much indicating in history, man drank the same drink as oxen, water. It's all they had. It's explaining where white wine and dark wine and all this wine comes from, and then it even like jabs at us. But this is he used to be the mother of all wines. So from here, all the other wines come from. So it's kind of like saying we're the best wine, you know? Dionysus pops up, and there's a shepherd, and he shows hospitality, the hospitality myth that we see with Abraham.
Sure.
Ovid's metamorphosis with Philemon and Bacchus. Like, it's a well-known common trope to show hospitality to gods that you don't know are gods. And he offers him the only thing he has, which is water. And as they're drinking, or it doesn't even get into the nuts and bolts of this kind of detail, Michael says this is a water into wine myth according to his standards. Okay, we can get pedantic here, but it doesn't actually say in the cup that was water that he handed him, now it's wine. It just says there was water. He ends up sharing a cup, kind of like, hey, we're sharing a cup, and he starts drinking it. Where did you get this purple water from? That's what it said. It doesn't give enough context to know like the mechanics of what happened and the transformation and where or when. It doesn't do any of that. But he grants it. He's okay with granting it, Josh. And I know exactly why. Call me the mind reader and psychoanalyzer all you want. I don't give a shit. It's after Jesus. It's okay if it's after Jesus. But if the scholars are right that this myth is riffing into the vein of water and wine myths that Jesus performed in John 2, why do you write a myth if it's not in a similar category of genre and tying into a known myth that we find in the Gospels? And why does the myth found in the Gospels also tie into a festival of myths that we find in Dionysus, where empty bronze vases are filled with wine by the god's presence? He comes and the miracle happens. Give me these other myths that are similar to this. There aren't in it. This gets into the nuts and bolts of this, man. And we have no problem being wrong.
Yeah.
If we're mistaken, we're mistaken. But dude, he literally almost wanted to make sure he distanced himself from me by just saying, you could have called me or texted me, he said. But when he did his hit piece with Manning, all he did was write me and say, I have a magic trick, because my initial documentary goes, what kind of magic trick are they in a pool? I have a magic trick. He doesn't tell me what he's about to do. He doesn't say, hey, I'm going to make you look like shit for 2 hours or an hour and a half with Manning and make you look like you don't know what you're talking about at all. No, he doesn't do that. So I'm like, all right, well, what kind of hit piece is he going to do? And he did his hit piece. Was I supposed to text Michael and go, hey, Michael, I've got a magic trick up my sleeve?
Right.
Or was I supposed to text him and reveal my cards and go, hey, Michael, let me see something here. Let me see. Joshua Bowen, I kind of went with the flow of thinking Josh was recognizing that you had already talked to him about this. This was my magic trick to say, dude, you're searching and it still turns out you haven't changed your mind? It's not a gotcha to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many things going through my head. Like, there's a difference here, I think, between if we're talking about how we engage socially with people that we consider to be friends and how we're engaging in a platform that, like, the context or the realm of ideas.
I thought we were friendly. I would have considered him a friend, but like, you can't pretend all friends are on the same kind of level. Look, he is in the opposition of what we do in terms of what we argue all the time.
Right. And so, like, in that regard, it always seems strange to me when it does feel like rules for thee, but not for me. Right. And I feel like sometimes there is this, the way that it comes across to me is that apologists have the ability or the right, maybe in their minds, to be snide, to poke, to have these streams where they focus in on minor things
Or mock. They do it a lot.
or mock, yeah. And because I see this with Kipp a lot, right? Kipp gets accused of a lot of different things when it comes to responses. But I'm here to tell you that I've never seen Kipp do a stream where he focuses in on some little misstep
And makes that the whole.
and makes that the whole stream. Instead, like, we generate these lengthy scripts together where, granted, we sort of like divide things up.
Yeah.
And in the script, it'll be like his stuff changes to purple, my stuff changes to pink or whatever. And we sit there and we research our own sections. And so maybe he's going to work on the stuff about Jericho here, and I'm going to work on the stuff about I or whatever. And then, but what my point is that it's all about the data and all about how that data fits into a broader interpretive framework and if it can effectively. And so, yeah, I feel like sometimes this sort of fixation on missteps. They did it with him on the casemate walls, which turned out to be its own very strange thing. But, hyper fixating on the fact that he called an early Bronze Age wall casemate when in reality it was just a double wall.
Well, you could use that if once you see multiple errors, it's worth pointing that out. Like if all you had was that, oh, you made a misstep here, don't waste your time. It's like what I said recently with Wes Huff's response to Neil. Look, I want to grant everybody the best intentions. It's hard to do that sometimes when competitiveness, I think sometimes people lie for God. Like I really do think some people are willing to do whatever to make sure that their castle doesn't fall. I know that because I was motivated in reasoning as a Christian to try to make it all make sense no matter what, to avoid any potential Achilles heel to my faith. So you do what you got to do. Wes Huff did the hit piece, and it's almost like Christians viewing this because what happened, context, he responds to Neil. This is before he got famous from the Billy Carson thing. So he's trying to ride Neil's wave for the Christian audience. I'm saying this and being pedantic because they go, you guys are trying to ride Wes's wave. Wes rode Billy's, okay? Billy was riding Rogan's, okay? And like probably various other people that are also out there, Graham Hancock and stuff like that. He's riding their kind of waves and stuff. Everybody's riding waves, dude. Get over it. Quit acting like this is some gotcha. But when he did a response to Neil, he only responded to a short on Danny Jones' podcast. He says he didn't see the whole Danny Jones thing. Maybe he didn't. I have a hard time believing that he did not watch that. That's my personal interpretation. I'm being not gracious here in that respect. But he responds to this short, which would make sense of why he is wrong in his critique of Neil. Now, whether if that's all he watched or not, he's still responsible for making a hit piece, responding to Neil and not getting the whole context because you stepped on the wrong people's toes, okay? If you did this to someone else who didn't know what they're talking about or aren't really interested in the facts and primary sources and scholarship, you get away with this kind of stuff because what are they going to do? And with us, nice try. Right. We're going to catch it. And if all he did was get a small thing wrong, okay, he made huge errors. And Neil caught that, and Neil's not playing with you. You play that game with Neil, and Neil's going to come at you, right? He realized that, took the video down. We didn't ask him to take it down. He did it, maybe thinking, look, I made mistakes. Cool, whatever. We don't care whether he did or didn't. We had our video up to respond to that. I'm saying all that to kind of echo what you're trying to describe here. And I think if all he did was get one thing wrong or a minor thing, we wouldn't even waste our time. He said that Neil was being dishonest. Well, you used the words first, man.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I'm guilty for Michael Jones saying shut up to skeptics who think, yeah, actually, I do think there's water in a wine myths before Jesus. Almost wanted to read you the source from Pliny. There's actually 2 quotes from him, and it's from a very important political figure, Musinius, who worked with Vespasian, the highest elites of the world at the time, at least in the Greco-Roman world. You might find elites like this in China or somewhere else, right? Like at this time. And he literally conveys that each year around the nones of Janus, January 5th, this January 5th, 6th date, you will see that Dionysus changes a water fountain that flows all year with water. It's like we walk in my front. I've got a lake out here in the front. It has a fountain. It flows with water. For 7 days of the year, it flows with wine. Michael, for example, though, it doesn't mean that the water changed in the wine. This is a kind of level of like pedantic detail. The water stopped flowing and the wine started flowing. Like this is how he wants to read it because he can't have it be too close to Jesus, right? This is how I feel he's doing it. So then in his stream of manning against me, he brings in Aristotelian logic. And he, go ahead.
Sorry. So that I understand. The argument is, and this is not my field, so of course, but just as it sounds to my ear, so you're saying that the argument then is that you have water in the fountain.
It's flowing.
And at a particular time, the god comes in and removes the water and then dunks in ostensibly wine.
He doesn't say that.
Right, but I mean, is that the idea?
Right. Well, there's several ideas we could play with.
But sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand. That's the apologetic argument that the deity doesn't change the water into wine.
Yes, exactly the argument.
So the Nile, I guess, the water was removed from the Nile and then God dumped blood in.
Right.
Okay,
No, not in that case. No. In the Bible's case, it's okay if the water changed to blood, okay? Or the water changed to wine. That's okay with God, the true God. But in our God, the case we're making with this God, no.
I mean, look, maybe there's something in the Greek that I don't,
Of course. I spoke to classicists on this, and they agree with what I'm trying to get.
What?
I know it's unfortunate that I get agreement from experts in this area about things they study. I understand. Because you know why I agree with them? Because I listen to them. I'm not the one making this up. Yeah, well, I think it's important that I'm like aligning myself with people who know this stuff, and I'm not the one just coming up with it. Just making that clear. So when I ask the expert, okay, hold on, Pliny describes this fountain, or it's either a spring or fountain, and I'll get these mixed because there's so many of these stories before Jesus. It's ridiculous, Josh. Some of the stories have 3 empty bronze cauldrons that end up getting filled with wine miraculously after they seal up the temple and seal up the jars. They're giant water basins. They're bronze. They seal up the temple, and the priest will show the city, look, there's no way to get in this place. So how, when we open in the morning, are they full of wine? Now, this is just one example, right? The God they believe, his epiphany, his manifestation, his presence comes. When he comes, wine miracle happens, okay? Which is a signal that this person is a God.
Mm.
If the transformation of empty air into wine or water into wine happens, this is an indicator for those who know the stories that it's a God and he has power. Why do you think Jesus changes water into wine? It's so fundamentally obvious because they're showing he's a God.
I thought it was because he was really nice and wanted people to have wine.
He was. In that story, in fact, they were already drunk in John chapter 2, and this is important because this plays into the context of Dionysus. They're drunk, and then he produces the wine miracle, allowing them to even become more. He brings the gift of wine. In John chapter 1, when it's talking about the Logos, and it goes down to the Logos became flesh and stuff, in the Greek, it says grace on grace in English translation, but it means gift after gift. He's a gift-giving donor deity who brings gifts. And so this is what Dionysus does. And his epiphany is showing the God is present. That's why the water changes to blood or wine, which is also indicative of the Eucharist. That's a whole nother thing, because John's gospel seems to be very much in line with like this Eucharistic idea of the God's presence is in the wine and in the bread. He is, and when you ingest it, you're partaking and becoming one. All this interesting mystical stuff. Well, Dionysus, in that myth that I was talking about Pliny, or in this tradition, 7 days out of the week, wine flows. It doesn't tell us exactly how the water, which flow year in and year out, now wine. It doesn't tell us. It just says now it's wine. But here's where it gets really interesting. it describes at this shrine where the god's presence is, probably an image of Dionysus in a temple where this wine water is happening. When you take the wine, it says this much. When you take it away from the presence of the temple where the god is, the wine starts to taste like water. Jones says, "Do you see the problem?" And his face, he's scrambling while I'm reading the source. He's like, on his live stream with Manny. And then I don't want to tell the audience. I want them to be sheep. He's literally doing this like this. And he's like, "Do you see the problem? Comment if you see the problem." Like, he's like coaching them. Like, you see it, right? You see it because like you're on my team, right? You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how he's coaching them without realizing you're literally doing the thing you're saying you're trying not to get the people to do. And then someone comments, "That's not water into wine." See, that's right, Nathan, or whatever the guy's name was. That's not water into wine. And I'm thinking to myself, so he pulls up this chart of Aristotle and how substances and accidents, he gives this lesson of how substance and accidents. You, Josh, let's say, is a substance, Joshua Bowen. Your coat, your hair, your beard, your fingernails, those are accidents of you, but they can all change and the substance remains the same. So then he makes this comment that just shocked me to my core. That's why we're thankful when we do the Eucharist, the wine, and the bread, the substance changes. It literally becomes Jesus' flesh and blood. But thank God the accidents don't change, or we would be tasting blood and flesh in our mouths. Now, I know we know that that's what they teach in Christianity, but when you think about it, and I've been really immersed in this, it's Jeffrey Dahmer level disgusting thinking to me at this point where I'm going, here's a guy who's telling me that this myth is not indicating that waters transform into wine and vice versa, who's going to tell you this cup, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, blessed are thy Father, Son, Holy Spirit." And next thing you know, boom, this is not a cup. This is Inanna. This is Inanna, okay? Now, it doesn't give the accidents of Inanna, but the substance of this is actually Inanna right now. Inanna. Now, your eyes and everything about your your awareness would say, no, that's not Inanna. Like, obviously, we would use modern day thinking to know, sorry, dude, your magical words did not change us into Inanna. But if I started seeing fingers or it started to change, indicating the accidents, the things about it start to show that it's starting to look like an Inanna, you can start to at least go, hold on, maybe there is some magical thing happening here in this case where it is becoming Inanna. It doesn't happen when the cracker stays the same and the wine stays the same and nothing changes. You have to play make-believe that something actually changed, that nothing did. It goes against all the normal reasoning that we have in our minds. I say that to say that when a description of a text is describing the accidents of things starting to change, you have to make the assumption that meant the substance isn't changing. And doesn't say either. It's not describing accidents as if the substance itself is not beginning to transform. Let me give you an example. Let's go with the Pliny the Elder quote, exactly what he says in an English translation. Eudoxus says that persons who drink the water of Lake Clitorius, this is the one you're scrambling over, take a distaste for wine. So if you drink this, this water makes them not like wine. People who drink from this lake, it makes them have a distaste for wine, okay? And Theopompus, which is 3rd century BCE, hundreds of years before Jesus, asserts that the waters of the springs already named are productive of inebriety. So they get you intoxicated. So they're a wine, there's water in it that gets you intoxicated. This is indicating the kind of things that Dionysus does do in water and wine stuff, right? So this is classicist and recognizes. So he says, according to Musenius, there is a fountain at Andros consecrated to Father Liber Dionysus, from which wine flows during the 7 days appointed for the yearly festival of that god, the taste of which becomes like that of water the moment it is taken out of the sight of the temple. Pliny the Elder, Natural History 31:13. Why do you think the wine, when you take it out during the 7 days, away from the site of the temple, does it taste like water?
It's to demonstrate that the deity is no longer having the effect on it.
Meaning it was water. Now for 7 days, it's wine. When you get away from the temple, it starts to taste like water again because the God is not present where you're at. And the God is the reason it tastes like wine, and it is wine, intoxicating and all that. That's literally the point I'm making. And he's like, it didn't change into water. It just tasted like water.
Do you know of any classicists that would argue that?
I don't know any classicists that I'm aware of. There might be Christian ones that might, because there's people who get like kind of like Egyptologists with David Falk, who go into another arena to try and validate their particular Christian perspective using their.
Let me ask it differently.
Okay.
Does it seem like when you talk to classicists about this passage, does it seem like they indicate that the state of the field is that most classicists say, yes, that's water changing into wine for those 7 days?
I've only spoken to a few classicists, but the ones that I've spoken to specialize on Dionysus. Like, that is their god that they really study. And one of them is Ana Isabel Jimenez San Cristobal. It's a hell of a name. It's a good long name. It's from Spain. She's from Spain. And I spoke to her on the phone. She's trying to learn English better. And I broke this down and communicated it to her. And she's like, what? Like, why would anyone bend over backwards to that degree? She says, some of the myths don't indicate that, like, they don't give you enough for you to draw this, like, this must be water into wine stuff. But then she said, some of them come so close that it's like, that's the implication. And she goes, and Derek, even without those examples, there's myths where Dionysus makes rivers flow with wine. With the logic in that, if you're getting that into the details that Jones wants to get into, where did the water go? It's in a river. Like, how does the river now, where's the water at? If it's flowing in the same seam of river, how does this turn into wine according to the story if it's not transforming the river into wine?
Yeah.
Meaning the water becomes wine due to the god. And the other example, I'll read it to you. You tell me what you think as a non-specialist. It's Plutarch, and this is the last one. But those of the Thebans who had remained outside, taking the city on their left, advanced upon the rear of their enemy at the spring called Sisusa. Here, as the story goes, notice it's a story, his nurses, these are nymphs, bathed the infant Dionysus after his birth, for the water has the color and sparkle of wine is clear and very pleasant to the taste. Lysander 28:4.
So where the water was, it was changed into wine.
It seems that that's what's implied. And let's pretend it isn't the conclusion. Can you see it close enough to seeing what's going on that Jesus is changing water into wine? I mean, it's so close that even if you wanted to dine on the hill, I didn't see the water itself transform into wine. I saw it sparkle and taste and have the color of wine, but I didn't see it become wine, which is ridiculous because the classicist says, sorry, this is saying it's wine. You understand how ridiculous you talked about you know how you said they hone in on like a thing? That's what Jones is doing. It's like a magic trick in front of his whole audience. Ha, va, va. But then he goes to Achilles Tatius. He goes, now that's water and wine. He has no problem accepting a 3rd century text that these sources I just gave you give you more data that water's being transformed than Achilles Tatius. And he says Achilles Tatius says water and wine. Huh. You know why? There was no wine. It says there was only water that the oxen and human drank. So where did wine come from? Well, the god brought it. So that dude, I feel I can't help but say this. There's 100% somehow dishonesty playing a role here. I cannot help. If that's dishonesty because I got to protect my castle, I can't help but assess this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm not a classicist, but those would be the questions that I would ask. The others would be like, I've not translated through the sections, John, but I mean, is the text explicit in the way that Jones would want it in these other sources?
I am glad you asked. Thank you. I'm glad you asked. So this is a good wrap-up point in terms of Jones, and if you have any other comments pertaining to apologetics, this is just the state of the problem I see with apologetics because, look, man, I think that these are all fantastic stories and myths and traditions and cool stuff, but I'm not persuaded yours is true and everyone's is wrong. So John chapter 2, I'm going to read you what I could do if I were trying my best, like Jones is doing, to make things different so that it doesn't work. Okay. All right. We know on the third day of the wedding in Cana, this is John chapter 2. It's the first miracle Jesus performs. His mother said to the servants, because they ran out of wine, whatever he says to you, do it. I'm just skipping ahead to verse 6. Now there were, and this is the point, now there were set there 6 water pots of stone. 6. Remember now, Aristotle, Theopompus, Pausanias, all 3 of these sources, I know them by heart at this point, which sources at least. I can't memorize each of theirs. It's not identical, but it's the same myth that 3 water pots of bronze and their water, this is the thing that I don't even know if Jones knew this going into this. These water basins are for water ritual purification. In the Greek myth, oftentimes they were used at weddings. I'm not even kidding you. I found one online that is literally got Ariadne and Dionysus married, a marriage water basin that has the god on it with his wife, Ariadne, and it's bronze, and it was one of these kind of bronze vessels that they use, right? So this is a really interesting point. It says 6 water pots. The Greek myth, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Bronze in the Greek, stone in the Jewish one. Of course it's going to be stone. They don't use bronze. They're Jews, right? All right. According to the manner of purification of the Jews, because they did that was how they did go bronze. They were doing stone, and it's water purification. So these 6 pots are for water purification. They're not for wine. They're for water in Jesus' case, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. That's how big they are. They can hold that much. Jesus said to them, catch this, fill the water pots with water. Pause. They're empty. Before Jesus tells them to fill them with water, they're empty, just like the other ones are empty in the Dionysus one.
Okay.
The difference is Dionysus ones, they never say add water to them and then the next morning, wine. They're just empty the whole time until wine's filled the next morning. Now here's where it gets interesting. Jesus tells them to fill the water pots with water, and they fill them up to the brim. I want you to catch my trick. I'm going to pull an apologetic to show you how stupid this whole thing is. You ready? And he said to them, draw out some now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it when the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from. But the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to them, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. And when the guests have been drunk, well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. I want you to go up with me. Catch the trick I'm about to do, but I'm telling you I'm about to do the trick.
Okay.
I am letting the audience know. Watch what I'm doing. Verse 7, Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water. Now here's the deal. How do we know they filled them with water pots with water? What if they filled them with wine? Let's play a game here, right? Jesus didn't fill them. Someone else did. What if they accidentally filled these with wine instead of water? And then when they pulled them out, and it just so happened to be wine. I'm being stupid here on purpose.
Sure.
Now let's go a little further, right? It says, and they filled them up to the brim, and he said to them, draw out some now and take it to the master. And they took it to the master. If I wanted to be pedantic and like really go, well, Jesus didn't have his hands on the process. Any mistake could have happened and wine could have been included in this instead of water. Now, I don't at all, that's such a dumb interpretation. But in this case, I could be very, very like peculiar and try to pick it apart and be very ridiculous and resist what the story seems to be implying. The God is here. He transforms the water into wine in these water purification vessels, 6 of them. And in the Dionysus myth, it's 3 water purification bronze vessels that get filled with wine. And then for centuries prior to Jesus, in the Greco-Roman world, this was the festival, the tradition. Everyone knew it, and it was all over the empire that they would practice these kinds of things. So, like, this was a very common tradition And you go to Rudolf Bultmann, Dennis MacDonald, experts on John, and they say it's a no-brainer. This is clearly a heathen legend that the this Jewish text or this Jewish tradition is riffing off of, and Jesus is doing better than Dionysus. That's what they say. They say he's outdoing him, just like Genesis would be a polemic.
Yeah. That's what that sounds like to me when you say it. Like if that's the interpretation that they're outdoing it, like, would you say 3 to 6? Yeah.
Yeah, I just think if you carefully are looking at that and you say, he tells them to fill up with water, but he doesn't have his hands on it. He's just telling others to do it as if, what, these people are perfect and can't make mistakes. Notice how I can get ridiculous, is my point. And then later on, he goes, when the master of the feast tasted the water that was made wine.
Yeah.
So that's what they go, oh, water that was made wine in verse 9, the very beginning of verse 9. That's all they need. And they go, so if we don't get a myth, this is how apologetics works. If we can't get a myth of Dionysus that says the water that was made wine, it wasn't made into wine. So when a spring is now flowing with wine for 7 days or 3 days, depending on the myth or whatnot, the water still remains water, but somehow wherever it goes, wine starts. So the water didn't change.
Yeah.
Do you understand how ridiculous this is?
Yeah, I'm scrolling through the Greek here and asking questions in my brain and wanting to do some lexicographic work. But yeah, it's apologetics, bro.
Yeah. Welcome to our world of what we have to deal with. So we dealt with Inanna. We mentioned Wes with his man-stilling. I pointed out, like, when you do get into the weeds, and there are experts who've written on this, like water and wine. This is a big rabbit trail, but again, it makes me not want to have to engage or deal with these people anymore and just keep doing my scholarship. Yeah, I'll critique them, but engaging with them, I just don't know what the point is unless I'm going to carry anxiety and constantly deal with what next hit piece is on me. If you can do all the hit pieces you want, I have zero interest. If I'm not going to engage you and I don't think you're worth my time anymore, go for it.
Yeah, sure.
Make noise. But I just don't think that they have an honest agenda of understanding and learning the material. And I'll say one more thing, Josh, is this. I'm falling more and more in love with these stories the more I study them as a skeptic.
Yeah.
The freedom and enjoying cool stories and learning about this stuff is so much more fun than the gotchas.
And that's the way that it should be. When people ask me, why do you study things that you don't believe? It's just a weird question to me. Because why does anybody read Harry Potter? Why does anybody read The Hobbit? Has anybody watched Marvel movies? The reality here is that there's so much more to ancient texts than whether we believe they're divinely inspired or something. It's what they reveal about our past. It's what they reveal about antiquity. And what we can glean from these very human texts, these very human mythologies, what we can glean, and not only about how they thought, but how maybe we should be thinking today.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Sign up for his course. Take his language courses. Go learn Sumerian, Hebrew. The Sumerian courses are taking place soon. I hope you'll check them out and let him know that MythVision sent you. Thank you again, bro.
Thank you.